Self-publishing in India, it's become a con. It's really that. We don't have a problem with self-published books because nobody walks into a bookshop and says, I want books published by Penguin.
Yeah.
They say, I want books that are good to read, or sometimes they ask for the author.
The book
Okay.
news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which author is trending? Which author has lost his appeal?
Yeah.
All
Which
this.
author is trending for the wrong reasons,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Book People. I'm Aishwarya Javalgekar, a writer, book editor, podcast producer, and the head of originals at Bound. In this path-breaking podcast, I demystify the publishing and creative industries and uncover the biggest opportunities and challenges for writers in India today. Today, I'm talking to someone who is not only frank enough to talk about what needs to change in the industry, but is also willing to create his own ventures to fill these gaps. So, Leonard Fernandes has an independent bookstore, he has a self publishing company, and he's one of the co founders of Publishing Next, which is a publishing conference where experts gather every year to talk about what's happening in the industry and where the industry is headed. And that's not all. In 2010, he received the Young Creative Entrepreneur Publisher Award by British Council. So I'm going to talk to Leonard about what's happening in the industry today. Where does he see gaps, or where does he see opportunities and possibilities of the industry growing further? What kinds of opportunities is he seeing for creators or for professionals who want to enter the industry today? And what is he going to do about all this? So let's find out.
Hi, Leonard. Welcome to the Book People.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited to talk to you because, you've done so many different things that kind of come together in the publishing world, right? Like you started Dogears Bookshop in 2006, then you started CinnamonTeal Publishing in 2007, then you started Publishing Next in 2011, and then 2016 again you did the sort of physical bookstore in Goa. So you've been wearing these different hats in the industry and doing a lot of these different things. So, what are these gaps in the industry that you've noticed over the years, or what was it that sort of almost compelled you to start this, or made you think that now I should start this bookstore, or now I should start this sort of publishing house for self-publishing? Where is that coming from?
Yeah, so I wish I could tell you that there was some epiphany somewhere, but nothing much of that kind of thing happened. And it's always been my wife and I together in this,
Mm.
although I'm the face kind of it. So we were abroad till 2005, and when we decided to come to India, we thought we will do something. I'm an engineer by training. My
Yeah.
wife is an economist by training, but we thought we will get into the book space and do something. And we used to do a lot of used books abroad. We thought that when we came back, we would do something in the used book space. So we
Okay.
started an online bookshop called Dogears, etc. Dogears for the used books, and we started that in 2006, and it didn't quite go well in that space because I think people are not very or were not very comfortable with selling their books, you know.
Hmm.
So it kind of didn't have quite the traction we thought it would have. But we got a lot of queries from people who wanted to publish books. They were, do you also publish kind of questions we got. So we were looking at the whole publishing scene, and if you look at the numbers that were floating around, and they are floating around even now, some 16,000 publishers or something in India.
Yeah.
And you wonder why are people asking for another publishing service, right?
Yeah.
So we looked around and we found these people called Lulu,
Hmm.
and they were doing something called self-publishing, which was not quite there in India in the way it was packaged and provided in the West. So we decided to introduce self-publishing to India. So we started in 2007 October, and we were the first to introduce self-publishing in India. So that's how we did that. We were lucky to have immediately found printers who could print one copy at a time. So in that sense, print on demand was also introduced, because we had people saying that they could print on demand, but they had a minimum order quantity like 25, 50.
Yeah.
Nobody could print one copy, and we found this printer in Chennai called Bhavish Graphics, who said, I can do that. And they did. They actually printed one copy at a time. So what it allowed, one of our first customers was Suleka, the search engine. I don't know if you remember them. They used to have a story competition, and the best stories they used to publish. And they were one of our first customers because they wanted small quantities.
And so when you got into self-publishing, was it that, you were looking at creating something where anyone who wants to self-publish a book can self-publish? Or do you in that have some kind of mandate where you say, okay, I want to specifically focus on these kinds of books, or make sure that these kinds of books go out into the world? Which are these very specific sort of very like small print run, or, one-off copies kinds of books?
So in 2007, self-publishing was not the sought after option. It was equated with vanity publishing, and it was not something that people were willingly going for, And the ones that were understood what it was, understood what it could do for them, and it was a lot of fiction, a lot of poetry, some very private consumption books like family histories and things like that.
Yeah.
We did not say, okay, we want these kind of books and we don't want that kind of book. We were not taking any books that had violence towards women. That is something that is still there in our contracts. And we were not taking books that were not edited. So initially we were allowing the authors to get it edited from somewhere else. And then slowly we took over that, because authors were saying the books are edited, but they weren't quite being edited. We were quite conscious of the fact that if a book is out there in the market and somebody is going to buy that book, that person needs to get value for money. And you cannot push a book that is not edited properly, that is not designed properly, that is not printed properly. We thought two things. One, it devalues the book. It makes the book not worth the price it is. That's on it. And secondly, it spoils the self-publishing industry for everyone. Meaning, going in, if people are going to equate self-publishing with shoddy work, then even if there is somebody out there who is really publishing good stuff, people will say, oh, it's self-published. So that was the thinking behind it. So we went with everything. We went with a contract. We went with a earning statement. We went with all these things required: editing, design, printing. That time only Flipkart was there in the market. So we tied up with them. Flipkart and India Plaza were there. We tied up with both of them to print and sell their books. So it was quite a comprehensive service even then.
And what about publishing next? How did you kind of come up with that?
So in 2010, we won the British Council Young Creative Entrepreneur Award. That was for CinnamonTeal. And as part of that, they allowed us to go to London, to the London Book Fair the next year, 2011. And we saw there how there is a discussion over publishing. People are doing different things, but then there's a forum where they can share their best practices, where they can share their knowledge of the industry. Kind of brings everybody on the same page, And these were the days when social media marketing was just kicking in, when it was called digital marketing that time. This was the time when print on demand was just kicking in. And there were some people who were not quite in tune with what's happening. And we thought that it's not quite fair for some people to be left behind, There was also this conference called Tools of Change that O'Reilly used to have in New York. And we thought we need a Tools of Change in India, So basically, Publishing Next was to bring everybody on the same page and say, this is what you can do with the resources you have. This is what you can, this is how you can um, partner with each other. This is what you can do in terms of marketing, in terms of book production, all kinds of
Right.
things.
So a lot
So
of knowledge sharing,
yeah,
and a lot of just more building that as a community, right? Which is
yeah,
not every publisher is functioning in a silo
yeah,
and doing their own thing, but kind of bringing them all together to see, can we do partnerships? How can we grow? How can we sort of help each other grow in a way?
yeah, absolutely that. So we had all kinds of publishers come. We had the independents come. Uh, the big ones, HarperCollins,
Hmm.
Penguin come. It was a kind of, that we are one in this, and we need to. So how to improve readership, how to get books out there, how to improve distribution, all these kinds of topics. We also used to have focus on new voices. We used
Hmm.
to try and find people who are doing new things, and even within an organization, the newer voices. And we had a large focus on Indian languages. Every edition had one Indian language panel where about 5 or 6 Indian language publishing industries were discussed. So there were 2 or 3 such unique features about Publishing Next. We almost always had more women speakers than men. We almost
Hmm.
always had a focus on Indian languages, always new voices. So I think in that sense we got a lot of buy-in from people who are otherwise, not considered part of the industry.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'm curious, how did you get all these people on board? At that point, say when you were doing the very first edition, right, of Publishing Next, was it kind of difficult to get people on board and approach them and say, hey, we're doing this and get them to participate?
Not actually, not really, because so the first time there were many independents who came on board.
Hmm.
In terms of foreign publishing companies, I think only HarperCollins was represented that year, but there were many small, what you would call small publishers. But gradually that changed, and more people came in, more participants came in.
Yeah.
uh, we started getting sponsors. So slowly it changed. But yeah, during the first years, it was not difficult. Nobody said no, I'm not coming. But it
Yeah.
was difficult to reach out to them, and. So
Right.
yeah,
It was happening in person as well.
yeah,
That now seems like such a
yeah,
dream to
so,
kind of go
yeah,
physically to places to do conferences.
yeah.
And I also noticed that also Publishing Next, the way you've been sort of programming it has also evolved over the years, right? Like in the beginning, I saw that there were a lot of, you had these panels and workshops, and you have all those videos and resources of those
Mhm.
conversations also available on your site. And obviously, recent years, because of the pandemic and lockdown and everything, it has also moved to awards, right? I don't know if you were doing awards from the beginning, or was it earlier just discussions and now it is awards?
So the first conference started in 2011,
Hmm.
and the award started in 2014.
Okay.
So this is our 10th year of awards. And so initially we were doing only 5 categories. Now we are doing some
Hmm.
12. Um, the idea was to get more people recognized for what they do. But then we went into, best editor and best illustrator also, because
Yeah.
we wanted to make sure that the people behind the book were also given the recognition that they deserve. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I noticed that, and I thought that was such a great idea to kind of not just look at, I think most awards or celebrations in that sense look at the book, right? And
yeah,
then the book is sort of associated with the author when a
yeah,
book wins any award, or
yeah.
it's like a best publisher. But I think it's very interesting to look at these, like the people who are actually putting in that work and making the books happen in a way. I saw that you
Yeah.
have best editor, best illustrator, and you also are focusing a lot on like children's books and picture books as well. I'm very curious where, at this point or in the future, are you also looking at other roles in publishing, and
We-
sort of specifically giving awards for those roles beyond editing?
Yeah, so we were looking at best marketer and all, and
Yeah.
we were not sure how we would evaluate them and who would evaluate them.
Yeah.
And this year, I think that Walking Book Fairs has
Yeah.
instituted a role for best bookseller, which is, I think, a wonderful thing that they've done.
Exactly.
But just to come back to the awards, it's a publishing award. So the best book award goes to the publisher. It does not go to the author.
Author. Yeah. I mean, generally, when you think of awards,
Yeah.
when they are book awards, they go to the
Yeah.
author.
Also, the best cover book awards go to the designer. They don't go to the publisher. So we, in that sense, we are a bit different, and we look a lot at production values. So for example, a book that might win a prize at JCB, or might not necessarily win the Publishing Next award, because we are looking at why did you make the book? Was the book Jora? Was the book pushing the envelope in some sense, in terms of the material that was covered, or in the terms that it was produced, or in the terms that it was marketed. So it's a very publishing oriented awards in that sense.
Makes sense. And it's also a good question of how would a marketing award or one of these other sort of roles, what would the parameters look like?
Yeah. Somebody had
Sorry, go
suggested
ahead.
that, we have a production assistant award, meaning these guys who are on the production floor. But again,
Yeah.
how do I evaluate them? Because also the problem is that, some publishers have resources to do it in-house, or they also, some publishers don't. And I think it does not, it creates an uneven field for.
Yeah. Even with marketing, right? Because it depends on what the budget for each book is, which gets defined, depends on what is the profile of the author, how can you separate what marketing efforts the marketing person in the publishing house made versus the author's marketing efforts versus just other factors that kind of influenced
Yeah, absolutely. True.
how well the book has done or not. So, right now, right? So when you kind of plan the next conference, say you're planning, 2023 right now, how do you go about doing it? Like, I'm very curious, how do you decide who to, choose as the jury? What are the parameters that are set? How far back in advance do you start planning for the year?
This is for the awards or for the conference? For the conference, two things happen simultaneously. We are looking for sponsors, and we are looking for speakers. So initially, we used to have an advisory panel that used to say, okay, these are the topics we'll include. But now we try and crowdsource them also, because there are people out there who say, this is a topic that needs to be discussed.
Yeah.
So, for example, and post-COVID, a lot of it is changing. Like, there are habits that are moving online. What do we do about them? How does that affect publishing? How does that affect marketing? So, and there are people so we get a lot of good ideas from people who who are in the field, in those fields. Awards, we have already announced the awards for 2023. We are getting submissions. We usually get them, like 5 days before the deadline. So that's always happens. But we get a large field. So like for book awards, we get 35 books. So and we so the jury is selected after the awards come in, after the submissions come in, because we try to keep a neutral jury. So even if there is a person from a publishing house who might be a jury for best book, but they have submitted the application for best publisher, we try not to engage that person. So that person has to be totally neutral to that edition of the awards, and that is sometimes difficult to do. So
yeah, I can imagine.
we are looking all over the place for also they have to know we need an editor to
Judge for editors.
evaluate,
Yeah.
We need publishers to evaluate the best publisher. So that jury thing happens after the submissions come in.
Right.
So
That's such a challenge though, because the more the award then grows, the
yeah,
more submissions that you will get in. It becomes more and more difficult to find
no, it
like
is.
jury members who are
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
invested because they've not sort of
yeah,
submitted to
yeah.
certain
Correct.
awards.
So we are looking. So we look at bookstore owners. We look at
Yeah.
library people who have libraries. We look at freelance illustrators.
Right.
So so that pool is something we tap into.
Do you want to work in India's publishing and creative industries and be one of these cool book people that I interview in this podcast? Well, now you can. We at Bound have come up with a 3-month comprehensive online course that gives you the skills and helps you get jobs in your dream companies, whether they are book publishers, magazines, literary agents, digital publishing platforms, or any other content company. So this course starts on 15 September. And essentially, in 100 live hours, we will be teaching you every single aspect of the publishing industry, and you will get to specialize in a particular field of your choice. You will learn from over 70 top experts from the industry and a lot of the book people themselves. So imagine you could be learning directly from Sayantan Ghosh, from Naveen Valsakumar, Chitranshu Tiwari, Radhika Timbadia, Disha Nayak, and many, many more experts. In addition to this, you can test your newfound skills in a capstone simulation that we'll be holding at the end of the course. And we will be giving you the chance to actually interview with the top companies in India. So we are hosting a 2-week recruitment drive, and in the drive, you will get to interview with companies like Notion Press, Cactus Communications, Rupa Publications, Little Black Book, and we have over 17 recruitment partners already signed up with us to give you jobs. And I haven't even mentioned the best part yet. We'll only be conducting classes on weekday evenings and on weekends, mornings, so that you can make sure that you can continue your studies, you can keep your full-time job, you can keep your weekend plans while you're doing this course as well. And don't worry, we've also accounted for Diwali and all of the festivals that will come up during those 3 months between September and December. Obviously, you will see me there as one of the core instructors. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at Bound India on all social media platforms. You will find the details in the description below. And I really hope that you will take this opportunity and use it to really build your career in the publishing industry and in the creative industries. Apply now.
So, based on all of these different things you do, because you wear so many hats, how do you see yourself? Like, how would you define Leonard Fernandes? Are you a publisher? Do you see yourself as a bookstore owner? Are you, a creative entrepreneur because of the award as well? What is your identity in this publishing ecosystem?
I would say bookstore owner because sitting in the bookshop it allows me a good view of the publishing industry. I
Right.
wish more publishers spend time. I think publishing. Many people have this view, and I subscribe to it. That if
Mm.
you want to start in publishing, you have to start working for at least 6 months in a bookshop
Yeah.
because that's where you get an idea of what the tastes are, what
Mm.
people are coming and looking for. You know how distribution works and how broken it is. You know how accessibility to certain kinds of books uh, is possible or not possible.
Mm.
You know how marketing affects books. you know and finally, as a publisher, you can then fine tune your strategies to make sure that
Right.
the end consumer understands what you're putting out there. And for me, it allows me that whole ringside view of publishing. It allows me to see what
Yeah.
publishers are doing. It allows me to see how the distribution and marketing is working, and it allows me to see what people are looking for in their books.
Yeah. Makes sense. And you're the one ultimately interacting with the actual readers, right?
Yeah.
Like there is
Mm.
that gap where it's like as a publisher, if you're sitting and you're assuming to a large extent what you think the reader will like, or
Yeah.
how what reader behavior is. But when
Yeah.
you're kind of in the bookstore, you're seeing that in person on a day-to-day basis of
Yeah.
what they like, don't like, or what their buying behaviors are like, how often do they read, or what kind of readers read what kinds of books. I
Yeah.
think that could be very interesting
Absolutely.
for sure. And the curation element as well, right? Especially with smaller, like independent bookstores,
Yeah.
because so much of it is you are curating based on your sort of tastes, but also based on what you think that readers would like to read.
So for me, curation is, it's not giving them more of what they are reading in that sense. So because they are reading a certain author, I will not bring the next book, but rather I would like to be known as a bookshop that introduces readers to newer ideas, newer kinds of books.
Mm.
You
So
know,
more discovery focused, where it's not
yeah,
like if you like X, you will like Y, but
yeah.
here is go challenge yourself and try a
Try this.
new
Yeah,
genre, like a new subject or
yeah.
something that you did not think that was in sort of your bookshelf already.
A bookshop is always a reflection of the bookstore owner in the sense that you will always try and buy books that you like also, and that process evolves in the sense that then, for example, when we started, we did not have much of romance and science fiction, and then
Hmm.
people came and particularly asked for those kind of books. So then you say, okay, this is what people want, science fiction, graphic books, um, a little thrillers, particular
Yeah.
kind of thrillers. This is so. If you're a literary fiction kind of guy, you want to fill the bookshelf with that genre, but then people inform you about their choices. So you don't bring the nearest, you don't bring the next romance that is there. You want to challenge even in that genre. You want a good read. You want something that will push the boundaries on even that genre, right?
Yeah.
So that's how you're always looking for books that people will find interesting to read. People will
Yeah.
find worth their money, worth their time. So yeah,
But is
so
it
that
a challenge to convince readers to try something new and get out of their comfort zone?
not if they are in a bookshop. No, that might
Okay.
happen online. That might
Yeah.
happen. Reader, if you say readers also read this, and then you look at the cover,
Yeah. That's very
and
algorithm, na? It's like if you
yeah,
go on Amazon, it's like, oh, I
yeah,
looked at this one book. Here are suggestions
yeah.
of
That
other
is that,
similar books.
yeah, and that is also it's a gamed algorithm. We realized
Hmm.
that because we published one in our self-publishing division. We published one book of poems, and we the author wanted it listed on Amazon, so we listed it on Amazon, and no sales, right?
Hmm.
So and then she comes and says, but Amazon said it's selling, and we went to see what she meant, and it was there. Buyers who bought this book also bought this book, and her book was there. But but it was
Ah,
Amazon's way of pushing the book, whereas she thought, also bought this book means people were actually buying copies of that book. So
right.
at all times you are being manipulated, is what we think.
Right.
There
What
is
is
some,
a recommendation is being framed as
yeah,
actual sales,
yeah,
whereas it is simply a recommendation.
yeah. And but to come to your question, no, meaning people will take the book that you show them, uh, and they will look at the back cover. They will even flip through the book. So
Hmm.
people are open to ideas. There are very few people who say no, I want only this kind of genre. You know, because ultimately I think it's a reader who's entering the bookshop, and they would read anything that they might find interesting.
Yeah.
So.
I think this discovery thing is very fascinating. When I was studying in Toronto, I had gone into this bookstore where they had a vending machine. So
Mm,
they had a book vending machine, and you pay like there was this base standard amount, and
mm,
you pay that and you get a token, and you put the token in the vending machine, and it just uh, gives out a book, any
mm,
book. So it is any random book, and you basically bought that book. So you have to be okay with that level of uncertainty. And it was one of those very niche bookstores where they had very, old or very, very, very niche, very specific books about like the most random things. So I think that again, it's that very discovery thing, right?
Yeah.
Being
And,
like,
and
are you willing to try something new?
and it's a very underplayed thing, because once you're in a bookshop, there is so much else that happens. Meaning you look at the book that you want, but you look also at the
Yeah.
adjacent book. And oh my God, that could be also interesting to me. And the whole idea of browsing in solitude, and this is your space. You're not being judged here. You can open any
Yeah.
book you want. I think all these things are they are underplayed and they are undervalued, I think. Which is
Yeah.
why I think bookshops are slowly getting the kind of recognition they deserve. And there are more bookshops coming into play.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think curation being one thing. And then again, like you said, right, the connection, right? Which
Yeah.
is sort of building a community around the bookstore as well, which I think a lot of bookstores are
Yeah.
doing now.
Yeah.
Where sort of people come for that bookstore after a point because they build those relationships with the people in the bookstore, or sort of the curation that that bookstore provides, and that builds that almost loyalty community kind of thing. Do you think that readers today value that? Or do you think that, because obviously I'm going to ask the big Amazon question. So, how much of a threat do you think Amazon is to bookstores today? And do you think that, readers are valuing the convenience that is Amazon of just like, oh, I go, I click, I buy, versus sort of that community or that experience of walking into a bookstore and browsing through books?
So we don't grudge books being sold on Amazon.
Hmm.
And I think Amazon is doing service in their last mile delivery of books. I think there are places, and there are places
Yeah.
even in India which don't have access to a bookshop, which
Yeah.
is sad. They don't have access to a bookshop. They don't have access to a library, and Amazon is doing that service.
Yeah.
What we grudge is the discounts,
Hmm.
because the book cannot be about the price alone. It just
Yeah.
it just it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that a book. Because I wrote about this in Twitter, and you must have heard it. What is the
Yeah.
need to discount Tomb of Sand? Meaning, what exactly are you trying to convey when you say Tomb of Sand is not worth 699? It is worth whatever. Is it
Yeah.
not worth 699? Should it, because it cannot be that Tomb of Sand is suddenly attractive because of its low price. Its
Hmm.
attractiveness and the worth of the book has already been conveyed by the numerous prizes it has got and the recognition it has got. Why does price need to give that push for the buyer to buy, right?
Yeah. It's
And
like treating the book as any other product, right?
as
Where they
any
are
other
like, okay,
product,
we want to up the sales of this product, let's give a discount or let's
yeah.
lower the price. But they're not looking at books as a separate category of products that need to be treated separately in that sense.
So much has gone into editing, so much has gone into writing, so much has gone into designing. You then finally stick a price on it and then say, no, that's not worth it. It's worth much lesser than that, right?
Yeah.
So that's where our issue is. And I'm quite surprised with the way publishers are allowing this. You know,
Hmm.
this is a product that you have put in the market. You're probably telling people that this is one of your best books, but you're okay with it being uh,
Discounted.
price being up and down and all over
Yeah.
the place. Meaning, so how important is that book to you in the scheme of things? So
Hmm.
that's where our issue comes with price discounting.
Right.
But to go back to your question, I think people who have browsed in a bookshop uh, will go online only if there is some, a midnight crisis or something. I have to buy a present, or I
Yeah.
have to get it delivered somewhere else and all. But if there is a bookshop around, they will go into a bookshop, is what I think. People who do not have that, who haven't had that experience of walking into a bookshop and understanding what browsing can do to you, and
Hmm.
I think they will continue with. But that's not their fault again. I mean, the fault lies in the
Yeah.
fact that there is no bookshop around, there is no library around.
Or do you think that bookstores were very heavily impacted by the pandemic,
Mm.
right? And the lockdown, and that was kind of a conversation that was ongoing for 2 years, where now things have opened up. So there is again that influx of people coming into the bookstores. But we also see, bookstores kind of trying to adapt or evolve to what they can become as a space, right? So like hosting events, so becoming an event space, or
Mm.
having sort of this bookstore come cafe kind of
Mm.
spaces where they become more than a place that sells books to sort of a larger than life thing. Do you think that that is a way that bookstores are sort of sustaining themselves? Like, is that the way to go?
Yeah, it could be. But so there is this book by a person called Jeff Deutsch. It's
Mm.
called In Praise of Good Bookstores. So Jeff Deutsch is a member of the board of something called a Seminary Cooperative Bookstore. See, it's the world's first cooperative bookshop, a non-for-profit bookstore, in which he says that the current rules of commerce haven't quite lent itself, are not quite suitable for bookshops. So if you just go by bookshops and say we'll make our money on profits, you know,
Mm.
that's not working for bookshops in the sense that the margins are low, the prices are low. You can't satisfy every customer walking in,
Yeah.
so you have to keep a large inventory, but that introduces on the costs and things like that.
Yeah.
And he's suggesting maybe there is something else to it. So when you're talking about cafe and books or stationery and books, you're talking about two different businesses that person has to make himself well versed in, right?
Yeah.
So there's a restaurant and books now, and it's not the same
Yeah.
business, you know.
Yeah.
And we have, for instance, wrestled with this idea of having a cafe in the bookshop,
Mm.
and we have always come back with saying no, meaning I don't think a person will come to a bookshop because there's coffee in the bookshop. He will come
Right.
to a bookshop and enjoy coffee, that's fine. But a person will come to the bookshop for the books. We
Yeah.
could be wrong on that, but um, because when I was in the US, I used to go to the Barnes and Nobles,
Mm-hmm.
and there are people who walk straight to the bookshop, and there were people who walk straight to the cafe. And very rarely was there were there people who walked into both. So anyway, but that's probably out, and people will still come and say, "Oh, you don't have coffee," but
Yeah.
we haven't quite got into it. And he suggests that that maybe we need to think about totally different things to make bookshops work. You
Mm.
know, like a subscription. So he doesn't know the answer to that. So maybe a
Yeah.
subscription service, or CSR or whatever.
Yeah.
Whether because it's a common good, like how you said, right? It's a community place. It is a place where children can learn. It is a place where children can read. There's a common good attached to a bookstore in like it's not attached to any other form of commerce.
Yeah. It's a
And
community space.
yeah, and so we are still in search for that funding model. But in the meantime, we try to do with what we have. So in our
Right.
case, we have some stationery, which is less than 10% of what we have in the store. But the idea finally is to make it work with books only.
Yeah.
Uh, it's
To
not
kind of
to,
have that sync where
yeah,
it should work together with
yeah,
books. I think
it's,
Champaka has a very interesting subscription model that
yeah,
they've been trying out for a couple of years
yeah,
for
yeah,
books
yeah.
for sure.
There was also LBB, I think. I
Yes.
don't know the full form. They went on Shark Tank, and somebody told them people are not reading, which is the most preposterous thing. Meaning,
But
in
that's
the, yeah, all the judges told them, oh, but people are not reading anymore. Which,
but that's what we hear every year, right? Every year is that conversation of, oh, not enough people are reading and like our
yeah.
books
And
dying.
it's not an assertion that's backed up with data. It is something that comes to their mind, something that is so repeated so often it becomes a truth. We had a Goa book fair, and we had just 23 stalls but the amount of people that walked in because there were books available there, I don't think it is that people are not reading. I think that people are not getting the books to read. They will not read because you give them a book and they should read it, right? They will read the book that they want to read, and those books are not being made available.
Yeah. Because you brought up Barnes and Noble. I don't know if you read that very interesting piece recently about how Barnes and Noble kind of turned its business model around a little bit, because again the same thing, right? Like Barnes and Noble obviously has books, right? But it had evolved into selling so many other things, and had almost become where maybe not even like 50% or not even 50% of the store was actually selling books, and then the rest of it was selling, stationery or other sort of knickknacks, and then they had the, sort of cafe restaurant thing. And then there was a piece about how it was turned around by just going back to that essence of it is about books and the love for books, so making it sort of less commercial, which I thought was just a very interesting piece to talk about books as well. I think because at Bound, we have this editing and publishing course that we offer where, it's kind of, we sort of teach people who are writers, who maybe want to become editors, who maybe want to work in publishing because they love books, right? And sort of one of the first things that we have to sort of teach them or explain to them is the fact that books are products, in the sense that that there is a business model, right? So like when a publishing house exists, it ultimately has to make some amount of profit, or at least make even to kind of stay afloat. So I think it's very interesting that it's the double thing, right? Where first you have to take someone who loves books so much as a reader or as a writer and say, hey, you know now you got to think of books as products, because you got to think of packaging and marketing and distribution, and how is this going to sell. And then again you have to be like, okay, but don't think of them as just products, and bring that love back and think of the larger value that the book has beyond just being a product.
And that's where many publishing houses stumble, because they haven't thought about the distribution and marketing. They get a very good product out, but then what to do with it becomes, and that's true.
Since you also do self-publishing through CinnamonTeal, how do you see self-publishing being integrated into bookstores? Like for example, in your own bookstore, do you also, sell books by self-published authors?
We do actually. I was part of the NBT publishing course just on Sunday, and this question came up, and I told them we don't have a problem with self-published books, because nobody walks into a bookshop and says, I want books published by Penguin. They say, I want books that are good to read, or sometimes they ask for the author, right? What's the next P.J. Clune book or whatever. But self-publishing in India, it's become a con. It's really that way. In the sense that people have been taken for such a ride. If you ever happen to come to our bookshop in Goa, I'll show you the kind of books that have passed for self-published books. They are printed on copier. They're printed on copier paper. They are stapled together. The cover is clip art with Comic Sans font or something, and which is printed on paper that is thinner than copier paper. There is no sense of aesthetics. There's no sense of editing, and then these are gullible authors who have gone and said, "Can you do it?" And that these are people who have said, "I can do it for cheap. I can do it for." The word thrown to them is free, and why wait for 4 months? So when people come to us, we say 4 to 6 months, because it needs to be edited. The edited version needs to go back to you. Then you need to plug in the holes and all that. There are people saying that we can do a book in 24 hours. You can Google this, and we wonder what book can be done in 24 hours. you know. So
Yeah.
yeah. So to answer your question, yes, we take self-published books, but we ask for a review copy. We say we want to
That
look
makes
at your
sense.
copy. Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to look at your copy, and if it passes, not muster, but because for us, when we are putting a book on the shelf, it needs to earn its place there, because as it is, we are
Yeah.
curating. And
Yeah.
for a person who is taking that book off the shelf and saying, I'll buy it, it needs to be value for money, right? It
Yeah.
can you cannot push anything because the customer is buying.
Yeah.
So
And you're advocating for the book, right? Any book that's
yeah,
on your shelf, you
yeah,
are
you're
saying that
endorsing it. Yeah,
I am guaranteeing that it is of a certain
yeah,
basic standard or quality,
yeah,
whether it's the material or the writing or whatever it
mm,
might be. And also, um, it's taking up space, right? Like
yeah,
if in a bookstore where there is limited space, there is a set number of spaces.
yes.
It's taking up space which could then go to another book.
Another book. That's yeah. And we still don't know why this is being done, because
Yeah.
meaning that person there is paying you for that book, right? He's paying you
Yeah.
for the services.
Yeah.
Why don't you edit it, or why don't you just, like, things like your and you are with that apostrophe in between?
Yeah.
I mean, these glaring mistakes are there in on the first page sometimes. And I think, what is the author thinking, and what are these people selling them? But
Yeah.
yeah.
I was going to ask you that about self-publishing because you mentioned quality earlier as well. And despite everything, there is still currently that a little bit of stigma attached to self-publishing, right? When
Mm.
when someone says, okay, this book is self-published because of just the sort of volume of self-published books in India right now,
Mm.
right? The average of sort of what people expect the quality to be is, something that is like
Yeah.
not as bad as what you said, but it's sort of like, okay, it's not going to be that professional level of, cover design, or it's
Yeah.
going to have errors, or it's going to have, grammatical mistakes, or it's just going to be not as polished as a traditionally published book. That kind
Mm.
of stigma still exists. So how do you sort of counter that stigma with books that go out of your publishing house?
Yeah. So people know by now that we insist on editing.
Hmm.
It's out there, and that's the only thing. Meaning, so we send out copies. We say, okay, look at the book. We tell authors who come to us, buy a book from us and see what kind of quality we offer.
Right,
Don't tell us. Just go somewhere, buy it, and see what you get.
right.
Because I might, if you ask me for a copy, I might print one nice one for you. But if it's out there,
Uh,
it's out. Um, but and coming back to your question, I don't really blame people for this stigma, because it's messed up, completely messed up, in the sense that you have what could be a really nice thing, and it's moved now. It's across genres. People are doing self-publishing, so that stigma is kind of shaken off. But
yeah.
it's in some way there also, meaning you will think twice before picking up a self-published book.
Do you think that self-publishing again has become about, if I know a book is associated with a certain publisher, a self-publishing publisher, then
Mm.
that guarantees quality?
I hope it becomes that, because then at least people will be able to differentiate on that one aspect, which is quality, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
editorial quality or production quality, um, because that can be a differentiator.
Mhm.
Because the market is so cluttered. Somebody pointed out that in the recent World Book Fair, there were 21 stalls offering self-publishing services, and these are only
Yeah.
people who were there in Delhi in their
Yeah.
stalls. So it's a fragmented market, and you need to, price cannot be a differentiator. It just cannot,
Mm.
because if you're looking at good editors, if you're looking at designers, then it's going to cost money.
Mm.
Um, the self-publishing service should also then ensure that there is some scope to recoup that money, and that can all come only if the product is good. You cannot expect people, to
Mm.
buy a shoddy product.
Okay. So, Leonard, what does a day in your life look like? right now with all the different things that you do?
Yeah. So my wife, Winnie, she
Yeah,
she manages the publishing.
yeah.
Um, the bookshop is what I do. So we have people there also, but the curation.
Mm.
Then if there are orders online, offline, then right now also the awards and the conference is taking up my time. So
Yeah,
yeah, even in something like book selling, you have to always understand or be in touch with what's the culture around
yeah.
in the place, right? So, for example, yesterday, that one Lucy Singh, I think her name is, a book
Mm.
came, How to Be a Boss or something is the name of the title. Um, and one of my colleagues said, oh, she had a YouTube channel,
Oh,
and
Lily
that's
Singh. Yeah,
really
yeah,
sick.
yeah.
Yeah.
Lily Singh,
And
good
I,
influencer.
and so you have to be in touch with all these aspects of a book.
Yeah,
You cannot be isolated and say, I'll sell only books. You need to understand what's going on, what are people like that Colin Hoover thing completely took us by
yeah.
surprise, you know. And they were not all the Colin Hoover books that were selling. There were only few that were selling. And then there was a problem there with what she said and what she did. So then there was a backlash, and so there's so much more to keep in touch about these
Yeah.
things. And
The book news.
yeah,
Yeah,
which author is trending, which author has lost his appeal,
yeah.
all
Which
that.
author is trending for the wrong reasons,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Unfortunately, there's not much of a cancel culture here in India.
Yeah,
Like, for example, when J.K. Rowling said what she said, um, it quite didn't. I don't think it affected her sales here in India, at
in
least.
India, yeah. Can you tell me, I mean, because you are telling me these amazing anecdotes, which I love. Do you have a do you have a wholesome book story? Like a book that you came across through the bookstore that you really, really liked and that you would encourage people to read.
So there are a couple of things. Like, for example, there is this book called Following Fish. So this guy went across the whole coastal belt of India, and he
Hmm.
saw how fishing was done in all these places, and
Oh,
he's put them into a nice book. Um, so there is that book. There is this whole series by Seagull about German translations that somehow came into
hmm.
the bookshop, and uh, fiction, non-fiction across the board. There was a lot of it, and then we have some perennial bestsellers like Jerry Pinto sells like crazy at the bookshop.
Yeah,
M and the Big Home, but
big
even now
home.
the education of UE and things like that they are selling. Translations sell a lot because we keep these books. We keep a lot
Hmm.
of translations across different languages. Ismat Chugtai sells a lot.
Hmm.
Mira, Mira sells a lot. Kyar Mira, she sells a lot. So we have these we have these few books that sell. Um, yeah.
And what is your stance on these new developments? Because you mentioned with publishing next, you kind of discuss, like create a space to discuss what are the different things happening in the industry right now. But sort of, if we look at what is happening currently, that is gonna very clearly affect the future. Let's say, now there is all of these, books that are getting adapted into different formats. So like book to audio or book to screen kind of becoming a big thing. Or even if we talk about AI, and how AI is gonna impact
Uh,
writers and books, which is like right now the
yeah.
big concern that everyone has. No, I was just gonna say, so what do you think are really the important things happening right now that are gonna impact the future? And what do you see the future looking like publishing 5 years down the line?
So when you say AI, I think it's going to be a major game changer. So we have said that about different technologies as they have come,
Yeah.
but AI is something else. Like, for example, I just put in a question: How do I scale my self-publishing business?
Hmm.
So it gave me, here are the 5 things you can do. Then for each of
Right.
those 5 things, it then said, for this thing, you can do all these things. And then for this thing, you can do all these things. And I'm wondering,
Right.
what is it? Like, for example, if I want to put a Instagram post,
Hmm.
and I want to get another take on a certain book that I'm trying to recommend,
Hmm.
and this guy just gives it. This AI just spews out something that you. So and I'm wondering where the content writers can add value. Where is
Yeah.
it? Because I give me 5 points. So that day I tried what are the 5 P's of publishing.
Hmm.
What are the 5 P's of book selling? And it gave
Yeah.
me 5 P's of book selling:
Yeah.
persuasion and paradise and something and something, and and it made sense. It made
Yeah.
absolute sense. And I'm wondering now, where is this? Where are these people who say they can do content and they can do copywriting? What is the value they are going to bring? And it's something that they need to think about hard, and they need to think about fast, because
Yeah.
people are they are going to gravitate towards AI as a very uh, so I can understand where the problems might be. The problems might be in fact checking
Yeah.
and things like that. But in
Fact
just
checking, quality checking, editing maybe
yeah,
if
you will need
needed.
an editor maybe, but
Yeah.
but but where else? Meaning in terms of ideas, and so you'll have to really stand out from the crowd
Yeah.
to be of any use to uh, in any industry. And that's a bit scary. Somebody was
Yeah.
telling me, like, for example, they can listen to Aishwarya and Leonard talk generally at
Hmm.
a cafe, get your voice modulation, get the way how you use certain words, and then put together a podcast on, say, some other topic for
Yes.
1 hour. So
Yes.
so where is the quality that you and I then bring? What is it?
Yes. There's AI now that can mimic voices
Yeah,
apparently and do, the whole podcast. There's AI that can, replicate video. So if
yeah,
we give them like a lot of footage of, I don't know, video footage of our faces, then it can like create sort of these deep fake videos,
yeah.
right? Where
So
it
yeah,
looks like it is us. So it's just like, where is the limit? Then again,
yeah,
art, right? When we talk about book
mm,
covers or anything,
yeah,
there's AI that is just creating art in itself. So even with books, I think there are now a few self-published books that are coming
mm,
out that have
mm,
been written by AI,
mm.
right? So
So, so,
authors
so,
are writing
so,
the books with the help of AI and putting the
yeah,
books out as self-published books. So
mm.
where is the
Well, yeah. So
where is
that
where is everything going?
and when I first heard of it, when ChatGPT came out, I
Yeah.
told one of our advisors, I said we need to have this topic at PN, because
Yeah.
there are probably going to be people who have not heard of it, and suddenly it hits them. Who owns the copyright to this text? Who checks the
Yeah.
facts? You know, how do you give royalties to this? Whatever. That is
Yeah.
one thing. The second thing that's worrying is the influencer culture. Um, so there are people who are pushing books
Hmm.
that might not be the best book out there. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
so basically, as a publisher, I have the ability to manipulate a market with products that are not my best. You know,
Hmm.
so I can slap on a good cover, I can slap on a good back text, and I can have an influencer, and I can get sales. What does
Yeah.
that do to other books? What does that do to the backlist? Um, what does that do to publishers who can't afford all of this? You
Hmm.
know, and then those are questions that we need to ask. What does that do to the Indian language market? Um, how do you get that? How do you go those sales? So yeah, so
Hmm.
there are trends that are out there that need serious discussion.
Hmm.
And what does it mean for Indian publishing going forward?
What do you think is gonna be your next venture? Now with all of these things where you're seeing sort of the new gaps or the new opportunities with your like creative entrepreneurial
No, no, no,
approach, what is the next thing
no. I no.
that you're gonna be doing?
We haven't quite thought about any next venture, but we keep thinking about how we can make book selling a little more. fun, a little more. Um, the tendency is to always gravitate towards the online, the web instead. But I think there are offline opportunities also. You know, like in a place like Goa, which is just 64 kilometers from west to east. We still have issues. We are still we are still a state with only 7 or 8 bookshops. We still have accessibility issues, and we wonder what else we could do that. You know, the Goa Book Fair that we did kind of opened our minds to the fact that there are people who want to have a book in their hands, who just can't make it to a bookstore. Bookshops can also be intimidating because the door is closed, or you know, there's a lot of glass, and so you don't want to enter there because then you might be expected to buy a book or whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
Or maybe it feels like you need to know things, like you need to be in the know-how of, oh, this is sort of, these are like the, great authors, or,
yeah.
like sort of, I think
Yeah,
that can also be intimidating.
you can't be asking a wrong question there, you know, because what will they say and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, so and so we wonder whether, you know, we need more pop-ups, or we need more children's festivals to get them reading and things like that. So our mind is working in those areas, but it's still within the realm of book selling because that's something that we've come to enjoy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen, I think, a couple of interesting, traveling library kind of ventures where they just sort of like pop-ups, right? Like move from space to space, especially within smaller towns
Yeah.
where there aren't a lot of bookstores. Or I think there was this thing, books on the metro, I think, which was
In Delhi.
yeah, in Delhi, where they would kind of do a lot of book activities or book selling, I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
on the basically Delhi metro line, which I also thought was very interesting, and like
Yeah. And
promoting books.
abroad this happens a lot because, you know, they have a lot of markets that keep happening. So they just go and park their thing there, which is slowly happening in North Goa also. Like for example, tomorrow we are going to one such market, and we'll just be putting up a stall there, and you know, selling some. We are also now looking inwards. Since we started with the All India conference and all, but now we are focusing a lot on Goa itself because there's so much more that you can do here itself.
Definitely, especially with like the tourism boost and a lot of people moving to Goa as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new kinds of readers entering Goa now.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially the Indian tourist, because the foreign tourist won't take a book because it adds to the luggage, but the Indian tourist, the Indian tourist definitely, and you know, a lot of local literature, a lot of the world literature, you know, because the Indian literature is available everywhere, but that whole thing.
Yeah, the very local or the very global, kind of
Not a
those
very
extremes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So my first question is, what is one thing that you really want people or readers to know about indie publishing?
That they set the trend in publishing. So queer publishing, gender publishing, all came first from indie publishing.
Yeah. What is a bookstore, like an indie bookstore in India that you really admire today, other than
Trilogy.
your own?
Trilogy.
Trilogy
I have
in
not.
Bombay.
I have not been there where they are right now, but I was there where they were before this. So yeah, but all the indie bookshops, if I can just say, the indie bookshops that I visited are lovely places. Meaning the other one in Goa called Literati, then Rachna Books in Gangtok. Meaning these are bookshops you really want to make part of
Yeah,
your
you can give shout outs to whichever bookshops you want right
yeah.
now. We'll make a list.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Trilogy. But if it's because it's close by also. So Pagdandi in Pune, also one more bookshop. Yeah.
Okay. Someone that you think is making waves in the industry today, like good waves.
Um, I think Kartika is doing some very good stuff at Context. Some really nice books. Arpita is doing some really nice stuff at Yoda Press.
Yeah.
Most of the indie publishers, like Richa Jha with Pickle Yolk, so all these people, I think the real seismic things that are happening in India publishing is happening under the radar with indie publishers. They don't quite get the mileage that they should get. They don't quite get the press that they should get. But and so many Indian language publishers we've never heard of, probably never will hear of, who are doing some lovely stuff.
Definitely. What is a fiction book or series or movie that you have come across that most accurately portrays Indian publishing?
That's a tough one.
Yeah. Have you come across any? Because I haven't.
Yeah. No. I don't know of any publishing setup book in India. Have you? Right? Publishing is
Where publishing is the setting, right?
is in the background, yeah.
Not a book. I can't think of a book. I've seen a couple of shows, maybe not Indian shows. There was this younger, which was based in, it was I think a US show where it was set in like sort of the publishing industry where this 40-year-old woman pretends to be a 20-year-old and go back to the industry. But that was very glamorous. So whatever I have seen of people,
like there is this book called My Salinger Years, where she writes about, and there are many books actually, foreign authors, but I don't think anybody has tried. I could be wrong, but
there is Paper Moon, which is a bookstore book. Rihanna Munir. Yeah, which is about, I think there are books still about like running bookstores or set in bookstores, or there are events happening in bookstores, but maybe not sort of a publishing house kind of a space yet.
Yeah. But if you're looking for books that, kind of symbolize Indian publishing, there is this two, First Hand Volume 1 and First Hand Volume 2 by Yoda Press. These are graphic books. And it talks about so much things. It talks about the collaborative way in which these books were done. It talks about it tells you about the risk that smaller publishers take with, form and genre and material that is covered.
Yeah.
And so many of them, Navayana, Yoda Press, they're just so eager to push the envelope on Indian publishing, and I wish they got the distribution that they deserved.
Okay, one last message for readers in India.
Because I'm a bookshop owner, I would tell them to go and get your next book from a bookshop and go with an open mind, and don't say I want this author and I want this book. Just go and ask the guy, can you suggest me a nice new book? And step out of your comfort zone, read something else, talk about that book, tag the bookshop. So,
I think that's a great message. Okay, thank you so much for coming on this podcast and having this amazing conversation with me.
Thank you for having me here.
That marks the end of another episode of The Book People. Tune in every Thursday for some breakdowns, some truth bombs, and some insightful and real conversations with industry experts about all things books. This podcast is created by Bound. We work with writers and brands to create content across formats, whether it's books, podcasts, newsletters, or screenplays. So get in touch to see how we can help you grow through stories. And follow us at Bound India on all social media platforms. I'm your host, Aishwarya Javalgekar. You can follow me on LinkedIn, where I share many more insights about books and content. Or you can get in touch with me at aishwarya@boundindia.com if you have any suggestions on topics I should cover, or if you want to book any of my services or consultation calls. Until then, keep writing.